So you were at the previous concert, the chamber music concert, a little while ago. I'm hearing it tomorrow morning, but I have heard that even though there was the last-minute, latest medical crisis where Paul Groves, the tenor, was unable to come because of throat problems, and so there was a substitution at the last minute, and that when he began to sing, you and Jeff were up in the back dancing.
Yeah, we were having a good time.
Is that true?
That is true. I can confirm that. What I am realizing, and I think this is something that my festival colleagues knew and didn't tell me soon enough, is that a festival is effectively a series of crises that have to sort of be handled from one crisis to the next. And then all the time, constantly, you just have to have a kind of unflappable sense of grace and generosity and make sure that no one sees the crisis that's happening backstage.
But that doesn't always lead to dancing in the back.
Yeah, well, that's Jeff. I mean, what can I say about Jeff? Jeff has created this chamber music series that is like an island of misfits, really. And I mean that in the most beautiful sense, that he brings all of these people together that can do the most extraordinary things in each of their own speciality and sort of brings it together in a way that is effortlessly organic, even though there are constant challenges and constant last-minute changes. I mean, this performance, this chamber music performance, also featured Inan Barnatan doing his own arrangement. It's not really a transcription. It's an arrangement of Rachmaninoff's symphonic dances, just the last and final third movement. I wish I could hear all three movements. And it's dazzling. Like, who does that? Who sits down and is like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to transcribe the symphonic dances, a huge, giant orchestral piece. It's probably about 80 to 85 instruments. It has a saxophone, for goodness sakes. And he's able to translate that sound through touch and tone and specificity onto the piano. I mean,
So what does all that mix and match and substitute and roll with it? The person, Stephen Prutzman, the pianist I ran into on the way here, and he said, oh, it wasn't like making lemonade out of lemons if you're dealt lemons. It was like making champagne. So in terms of what you see the festival as and what you see the festival as becoming and remaining in the future and the present, give me a sense of what that, where that fits.
well, I think Jeff is sort of an inspiring role model because Jeff has omnivorous, agnostic tastes and is willing to do anything. But he always has the highest standard of artistic excellence. And he can bring all of these things together with his omnivorous sensibilities and hold this incredible standard of artistic excellence throughout the festival. And I actually think that he was a standard bearer, or is a standard bearer for the festival, and is a standard bearer of artistic excellence for the festival. In a way, you know, I look at what he does, and sometimes I think we're just trying to catch up with him with our productions and our big operatic pieces and our big work. So I mean, like, he's pretty magisterial.
What about you going forward? I mean, how does this sort of all the balls in the air kind of thing fit with where you think the festival is going?
Well, you know, it's funny. I think, first of all, Nigel is a curatorial beacon. And I had worked with him closely in 2014 when Houston Grand Opera brought The Passenger to the Lincoln Center Festival, and we co-produced it together at Park Avenue Armory. And what Nigel's whole thing really was bringing together all of these disparate forms and then watching them collide into each other and feeding off of that catalytic energy. And what I'm trying to do is slightly different. I want to find ways to draw the pieces together and to make those connections, but without making it overbearing in its thematicness. I want to sort of feel like there is something that is underlying, that people can kind of sense, that there's something related that they can't quite put their finger on between Omar and Unholy Wars, or Yusu N'Dour and Reggie Wilson, or Reggie Wilson and the Ligeti Piano Concerto, but they can't quite put their finger on it. And I think that's really spectacular. That's really exciting to kind of bridge these different things together, have that disparateness, have the difference, but then have something that feels like it's kind of amoebic, that it's still part of this kind of loose body of things that feel related.
So when when I came down here this year and I turned on my TV, there was a TV ad with you in it pushing a bicycle, and
Yeah, the future is here. Yeah.
and you were not wearing a suit, and you were not driving a Rolls Royce, and you were pushing a bicycle, and you were on TV pushing the festival, and that's a first. And I'm not saying anything about. This is not a criticism of Nigel in any way, shape, or form, but his style and he wore a suit and he all the time and drove an antique Rolls Royce that was loaned to him for the festival, and it created.
I wore suits. I mean, I wore sneakers. But I wore suits, yeah.
But no tie and so on and so forth. And you aren't driving a Rolls Royce, you're walking or pushing a bike. But the point is, there was an immediate visual sense of stylistic difference that must be meaningful in some way, or you wouldn't be doing it.
Yes, I think that is true. I think I can see some of my colleagues in the back. I have an intrepid marketing department that is, I think, trying to capitalize on my youth, even though I don't see it sometimes, making me do TikTok dances and commercials, and I'm game for it. But I think what is deeper there is I want people to enjoy. I want people to play. I want creators to be in a playground. I want the festival to be a sandbox of creative ingenuity that is really unlike anything that has ever existed. That's why what I'm interested in, because this festival has the existing parts, it has the pieces to make that happen. What I'm interested in is leveraging its interdisciplinariness, the fact that it has chamber music, it has orchestral music, it has theater, it has dance, it has opera, it has folk music, it has jazz, it has rock music, it has all of these different things that we can bring together and then leverage that to produce and create new art. It's remarkable, and it's a breath of fresh air for the artists. There are tons of artists out there who are either jazz musicians or classical musicians that feel hemmed into what they do. And what's so and what's so exciting about chamber music is that, Jeff has been doing that. He's actually been bridging all those different divides. I mean, that's what's exciting about, Steve Prutzman and the Stevie Wonder songs, is that why should we not have Stevie Wonder next to Schubert? Why shouldn't we have, Omar next to Incredible Dance? And why shouldn't those things somehow feel connected? And also, why shouldn't we commission an incredible jazz drummer to write an opera, or commission a folk banjo specialist historian to write an opera? I mean, that's what I'm interested in, and that's what we're trying to do. Tear down those walls, because those walls are contrivances. Those walls are artificial. They don't exist.
Once upon a time when the festival started, and I don't mean just when it started in Charleston, when it was in its earlier years in just Italy, or when it was Charleston and Italy and so on, the world was different, but the Spoleto Festival made news on front pages of newspapers like the New York Times, and culture was front page news. And it sounds as if you're talking about being in the vanguard of commissioning and making news again.
Well, we were on the front page of the New York Times this year. For tiny little square at the bottom. And we were also certainly on the front page of the arts section. I think people are getting that. I think people are feeling that. The festival structure is unique. You don't have opera companies or theater companies or ballet companies put together something of such energy within a 17-day period. You don't have all of these different things be interdisciplinary and collide into one beautiful, large mosaic of art that, if you step back, actually does produce a coherent image. So what they are doing is they're focused on a specific region and serving that specific region and building public value for that specific region. We want to do that here too, but we have national visibility. We have international visibility because we are a time-delimited event. We have to use that visibility and be nimble enough to create the works that can eventually go to opera companies or could be co-commissioned with a dance troupe or can go to a symphony orchestra and actually lead the performing arts that way.
Is it fair to say, this in stark terms, that in effect, going forward, in a cultural environment where the audiences tend to be over 65 and white and dwindling in number because of that, that it's either become cutting edge or die?
I think there are two things. I think the pandemic has shown us, and this is very stark, but I think the pandemic has shown us that we either grow or die. If we stay the same, we just lack the relevancy to move forward. This city itself has grown through the pandemic. This region has grown through the pandemic. We have to grow to meet the growth of the city and the region, and we have to anticipate future growth. So I think it's grow or die is a mantra that sounds unnervingly Silicon Valley to me. And I think the other thing is that I think companies are trying to find ways to innovate. I mean, that's why Omar was co-produced and co-commissioned by San Francisco, Chicago, Detroit's coming on board, LA, Carolina Performing Arts, and Boston. I think that's because they see that this is innovation. They want to be a part of that. They want to be part of that new work. So people are trying to innovate, but the festival is, again, unique because it's multidisciplinary. We are going to be working on a greater cross-segmentation effort. Why can we not bring in the same group that sees War and Treaty into Unholy Wars, or the same group that sees Unholy Wars into Taishan Sori, or the same group that sees Taishan Sori into Malpaso Dance Company? We have an ability to tell a greater story through these individual parts and actually create an incredible narrative that people can follow through a festival. And we have to come up with the devices to actually capture that and push back against that dwindling audience. But there is one other thing. There's one other thing that I think this festival this year has accomplished, and there's still much more to do. We have put on stage artists that are representative of a demographic we wish to serve. And I've seen that at Power by Fist and Heel. I've seen that at Yusu and Door. I've seen that at Omar. I've seen that at Ballet Encore. I see that there is different sections, different hints of an audience that is not a typical homogenized entity, and we need to tap into that.
But it's still a very small component of the audience as opposed to the audience as a whole. How do you get them in the door?
That is
all these other people that need and should want to come to the festival.
Yeah, we need to do more. I mean, you're 100%. I think that is one step in a three-part plan of access. So the first step is have artists that represent a demographic you wish to serve. We can do that artistically. We're already doing that. The second step is to build and create works of art that go into the wider community, that are not limited to the peninsula, but go into West Ashley, go into Johns Island, go up and down the Gullah Geechee corridor, that is effectively like a mini production vehicle that is related to what we're producing at the festival for the festival period, and create that public value in those communities, have them move into community arts centers, have them in schools, and have that created in order for people to see that we are telling stories that are also about them. And then the final point, you can't just do those two things. The final step is to lower the barrier of access to the festival itself.
Well, partly that's price.
Yes, it is. Partly that's price. And we have to find ways to have community rush tickets, make sure that people can come in to events where if we have an unsold seat that's released 2 hours beforehand, you pay $20 a pop and you come into a festival event. We have to have more supporters, foundational and corporate supporters, that would give us a greater amount of leverage for lowering ticket prices for certain communities that we wish to serve. And we have to have people on board with the festival itself that understand what we're trying to create and what we're trying to engender at all parts of the festival, from the board, through the staff, through artists, through stakeholders, that we want to create public value.
How do you reach out? I mean, maybe it's more television ads, but maybe it's some other way, to people who are under 65, who don't know about the festival. I mean, I would argue that if you don't already know about the festival and have already bought tickets for the festival and are on somebody's mailing list to get brochures, it's almost impossible to find out whether you're in Charleston or whether you're in Chicago or San Francisco or New York.
Yeah, that is not only a challenge for the festival, that's a challenge, again, I hate to invoke this, that's a challenge for every single tech firm in Silicon Valley. I mean, the reason why tech companies have completely flooded the marketing hiring landscape with huge salaries that not even, banks and major Fortune 500 companies can compete with, is because they realize that everything, their live or die, their grow or die, is based on online conversion. Because so much of that younger cohort exists online. And it is hard for the festival to break through that, because we know there's a lot of noise online. As a matter of fact, the whole idea of coming here is to get away from the screen, to switch off, to actually enjoy communal congregational art. So we have to figure out how to actually leverage that for the festival itself. It's a huge challenge. It's not going to be easy. It's something that faces the entire sector. But we've got some things in our camp. The first thing we have in our camp is that we produce across the board, and we're producing new work. It's not going to be the same thing as going to your regional opera company or going to your regional dance company. It's going to be a completely different thing that you've never experienced before. The second thing is that people really care about being in a community. They cared about it. They cared about it through the pandemic. They care about it now. People want to be in live performance. They want to be in a theater. We have to reach out and we have to take advantage of that. And we haven't really had the opportunity right now to do that, and we can do it in 23, 24, and 25. And then the last thing is we have to be on the cutting edge, and we have to anticipate how technology treats us as a potential client. That's really, really hard. We need more people to advise us. We need more people who can understand those leveraging marketing points online to make sure that we can, with the very little resources that we have, the limited resources that we have, leverage against all the noise that exists online. Maybe that's digital work. I think digital work is great. I think it's great for visibility. I do not think it replaces being in the theater. But I think that there are ways to bring people in that are younger through digital work. And maybe it's also effectively through Instagram, word of mouth, and TikTok. I mean, those are vehicles that can really power up a local community and a younger generation to participate in what this festival can create. And I'm happy to be lampooned on TikTok. And I'm happy to leverage my own Instagram limited visibility to actually draw that community in.
Well, they have to be drawn in to something they want to see.
That's true, and that's where it comes back to creating the work that people want to see. I think Omar accomplished that to a certain degree, and I think we go forward by identifying specific artists that are interested in accomplishing those works that kind of fall in between traditional boundaries. So Tyshawn Sorey is a really interesting person, because Tyshawn he's like the LeBron James of drumming. He is the most incredible jazz drummer or drummer of our generation. I mean, the amount of meters he has running concurrently, the touch, the pitch he can create through his drum kit is remarkable. But for Teichner, being a drummer wasn't enough. He also wanted to be a composer. Now, people who know jazz history know that drummers have always had a bad rep as composers, basically. I mean, Max Roach did a lot to kind of push back against that. But it's very hard for a drummer to be a composer. Normally, it's a saxophonist. Normally, it's a trumpet player. It's not normally a drummer. But being a jazz composer for Teichner wasn't enough. He wanted to express even more. So he went out and got his PhD in composition at Columbia University with George Lewis, who will be at the festival next year, hint, hint. And he is creating work that is so strange because it falls in between the spaces of jazz and classical. And I know that people have tried to do this in the past. Gunther Schuller wrote about the third stream of classical and jazz and combining those forms. I mean, and Leonard Bernstein tried to put, some jazz rhythms and jazz tones into West Side Story and Candide. And I mean, it's been done with limited success. But he's actually tackling it from like a structural compositional perspective. And he calls what he does spontaneous composition. The kids of the orchestra, I shouldn't say kids, the young artists of the orchestra were fired up by this. They were incredibly engaged. And he said last night that the Spoleto Festival Orchestra was better than 80% of the professional orchestras in this country.
Wow.
And the reason why he said that is because those students, those young artists, were game to try something new. It's in youth. We have to find the newness in that generation.
You mentioned that you needed to do outreach in West Ashley or Johns Island and so on. Is that, in essence, creating a year-round presence of the festival as opposed to helicoptering in for the longest time? The festival kind of drops in from Mars. In sometime in April, and then
Is my green blood showing?
But you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
It's a helicopter institution, and then it leaves.
Yeah, I mean, that's entirely correct. I think historically the festival has felt like a categorical imposition on the city for 3 weeks, or 2.5 weeks.
An excuse for a party.
And a very good excuse for a very good party. But I think you're right. These things aren't individual components. We're not talking about community work and then talking about production and being more production heavy as individual entities. They're actually very much interrelated. When you create new work, you have to have more time with the artists in Charleston to actually look at the sites that they're creating in, to actually understand the productions that we are building, to have workshops here, to have site visits. It means more presence of a Teichner Sori, of a Rhiannon Giddens, of a George Lewis, to be here and potentially give more to the community.
So not just dropping in to a school in a program sponsored by Coca-Cola and just, on a one-time basis during the festival.
No, I think we're looking at potential long-term mentorship schemes, things like that. When you have these artists have that visibility for 1, 2, 3 years, you have to plan to create that work. You have to plan 3 years out. That means further engagement and opportunities of engagement year-round. You have to plan to build those things, and you have to make sure that the artists are engaged at the front end with the kind of community-driven work you want to do. So we are interested in attracting the artists that are interested in creating public value, that are interested in making sure that this festival is a cultural cornerstone for an ecosystem for the entire Southeast. And they see that, they want to be a part of it.
Tell me about your background. I mean, how did you start out as a child? Well, tell us your history a little bit. Where were you born? Where did you live? What kind of
It's confusing history.
musical background did you get as a child?
I was born in London. My parents are Coptic Egyptian. My dad is from Alexandria. My mom is from Cairo. I was born in London, lived there moved to the US more or less when I was 4. settled eventually in New Jersey. No people, no fans of Jersey. There we go. Bruce Springsteen, The Turnpike, Jon Stewart. I mean, we've given this country a lot, you know.
The Sopranos.
Okay, The Sopranos, fine. We've been pushing back against that image it's fine. When I was young, I was effectively like in my church choir, singing a lot, also singing a lot of Coptic chant, which is an unusual oral tradition that uses microtones and has a different scalar system. And when I was 8 years old, give or take, something like that, my music teacher at my school said that I should try out for the Philadelphia Boys Choir. Tried out at 9, I joined, and that's where my ascendancy to diva boyhood soprano began. When I was 9 years old in 1993, they took us on a tour to the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Poland, and Hungary. So you had a bunch of 9, 10, and 11-year-old kids in these countries that, you know, were part of the Warsaw Pact just a few years earlier. And that was a kind of eye-opening experience for me. The following year, I traveled to France and Switzerland on tour with the choir, and then after that, I went to Australia and New Zealand, and had the chance to, you know, sing in the Sydney Opera House and sing in Carnegie Hall, and sing the boy shepherd part in Tosca, which is still in my brain. Si festeggi la vittoria. Like, I'll never forget it. So I started as a singer, and I also played a lot of piano. And then when I was sort of early 14, late 13, but more or less 14, my voice started to change, and my world was wrecked asunder. And I became much more interested in playing the piano and composing. I was very interested in playing soccer, so I played soccer throughout high school and ran track and was still in the choir. And my parents, who are of a certain immigrant demographic, wanted to expose me to music because it's important to them. And they thought it was good for my self-edification, but they never really wanted me to pursue it. They thought I would go down the well-trodden path of clerical professionalism and be a lawyer or be a doctor, as a good immigrant boy would. But I decided, instead of going to GW and going to law school or going to pre-law, I decided to go to Temple, much to the chagrin of my parents, and pursue music at the Conservatory in Philadelphia. Did that for 4 years, and I told my parents, don't worry, I'm just going to do this as an undergrad, and I'll do the LSAT, and that's it. I just need to get it out of my system. I studied composition at Temple. Senior year came around. Actually, junior year, I was invited to write a piece for the International Opera Theater called La Storia di un Ciliegio, the story of the cherry tree. And we toured it throughout Umbria and went to Spoleto, Italy, oddly enough. And it was a horrible piece, don't look it up. And when I came back my senior year, the director of my honors program said, you know, you're a good candidate to be a Marshall or Rhodes Scholar. You should pursue that and do music. And so we secretly worked on that application.
You didn't tell your parents?
I did not tell my parents. We secretly worked on that application while I did the LSAT. And I got into Oxford on a Marshall Scholarship. And I told my parents, look, I mean, at this point, I don't think you could stop this train. And so I did my master's and PhD at Oxford in musicology and composition. And then had an interesting career path that led me here.
What was your first job out of college?
So I finished my PhD. I went to New York to pursue a postdoc fellowship at NYU. Decided I didn't want to do that. And then I spent about 6 months working for Opus 3 Artists, which is a major classical music agency. They represent people like Yo-Yo Ma and Daniel Barenboim.
Oh, that's useful.
Yeah, it was very useful.
That's very
it was a good 6-month
especially
internship.
now.
Yeah. And did that for 6 months, and then I was I applied for a position at Houston Grand Opera. I did a lot of research. There's a woo out there, very good. I did a lot of research in opera, and I spent a lot of my academic work writing about opera and writing about some of the problematic tropes in opera, I was just like, this could be a cool job. Like, I can get into the production side of opera while also having a foot in the door of academia, because there was a cross appointment with Rice University in the musicology faculty. So I went to Houston for 3 years, which is hotter than Charleston, and more mosquitoes and bigger bugs. And I was there.
Traffic.
And worse traffic, yeah. And I was there for 3 years, and was the dramaturg initially, and then the assistant artistic director. And my role was effectively page-to-stage production of new works. So oversaw commissions by Ricky Ian Gordon, started the last piece by Carlisle Floyd, Prince of Players. He passed away recently. And I did that for about 3 years. And while I was in Houston, I was recruited by Daniel Barenboim and Michael Naumann, who was the first German cultural minister, to come to Germany to found their academy, the Barenboim Said Academy.
You gave me a little hint a few days ago of what your interview process was like for that.
How many people here know about Daniel Barenboim? Okay, we got a few hands raised.
We think of him as a magnificent performer and somewhat controversial human being.
Daniel is, he is perhaps one of the most important musicians in classical music of the 20th and 21st centuries. He is an incredibly influential conductor and pianist. He speaks 6 languages, so he beats me.
Compared to you, how many do you speak?
5. Well, my Italian has gotten really bad, so let's say 4.5. And he has really used his platform as this international figure to try and create an understanding. And I honestly believe that my practice as a producer and as a cultural leader is because of this. He has spent so much time and energy trying to create understanding between Israelis and Palestinians through an orchestra called the West Eastern Divan Orchestra. Of course, being Arab, I was very interested and intrigued by the prospect of working for Daniel. I had known of him reputationally and knew that he was a demanding boss. And I sort of took 5 days vacation. In 2013, at the end of 2013, I flew up to New York to meet Daniel at Carnegie Hall. He was just conducting a concert of the West Eastern Divan Orchestra at Carnegie Hall, and had like a very intense conversation with him before the performance, which is a stressful time anyway because everyone is just running around with their like headless chickens. Before the performance, talking about what this would be and what kind of academy we would build in Berlin, and then followed that up with a long dinner after the performance where he grilled me as much as the steak I was eating, and which was overdone. And so I went back to Houston after that experience. It was early December. I didn't hear anything for about 6 weeks. And then I get a call from Daniel out of the blue saying, I want you to come to Europe and fly to Spain, where we'll be performing in Sevilla, and then go to Abu Dhabi with me. And I'm just like, dude, I've got a full-time job here. I can't just like take time off and like go on a junket like around the Mediterranean. It doesn't work that way. And he's like, well, if you're interested in this job, you'll figure out a way to make that work. And I figured out a way to make it work.
So you were just flying from country to country to country, and sitting side by side with him, getting grilled, or what?
Yeah, we had a chartered flight with the orchestra, and me and Daniel would be seated in the front. He wanted to test out my linguistic ability, see if I could really speak Arabic and French and German and all these different languages. And also basically talked about music. I mean, like intense conversations about Wagner and anti-Semitism, deep conversations about Edward Said, who wrote Orientalism and was the co-founder of the West Eastern Divan Orchestra, and who is a scholar that my work academically is very much indebted to. He's effectively the great dean of post-colonial theory. We talked about everything from politics to, Lionel Messi to Verdi versus Wagner. In my hotel room in Abu Dhabi on the last day, he calls me and he's like, I want you to write a proposal for what this academy could look like. And he's like, and I want you to bring it to my room in 3 hours. So I sat down, I started writing. It's like crazy.
This sounds like an exam.
It was worse than my PhD entrance exams at Oxford. I mean, it was really stressful. And actually, when I was a master's student at Oxford studying for those PhD exams, my hair started to fall out. I had like a weird alopecia thing. And thankfully, it's grown back and it's been thick and vibrant ever since, until this moment with Daniel. And I started pulling my hair out again.
Oh, no.
I've since gone to therapy and worked on it. And so I went up and I presented this sort of schema of what the curriculum should be and what the structure should be. Then went back to Houston, again, didn't hear for a month. And then he called me and he said, okay, we want you to be the founding dean of this academy.
And you were how old?
Oh, God. 26, 27? No. I was 29.
But still. Still. So you're 29. You say yes.
Yeah, I did.
Did you? When they said founding dean, did you kind of take a gulp?
No. So this is going to be an insight a little bit into my personality. There was a title that first said something, and then I said, maybe it should be this. And then they said, maybe it should be that. And then I said, maybe it should be founding dean. And that's how we came up with that title. So I was definitely up for the job.
What does the academy do? Why is it in Berlin?
So that's a very good question that a lot of Germans asked when we built it. Germany has 3 opera companies and now 3 music conservatories. It has a very famous one called the Hans Eisler Conservatory, Musikhochschule. And then there's another one called the UDK, the Universität der Kunst, the University of the Arts. And now the third one is the Barenboim Said Academy. And this was an academy. All of these other institutions in Germany, by the way, are mostly funded by the state. And Germany is a federal entity. It's like the United States. You have different states, and then there's a federal government that oversees it. So all of these were funded by the state of Berlin, which is a small state that is within the larger state of Brandenburg. And so the Berlin state funds Hans Eisler, and it funds the UDK, and all these different things. And this was going to be a federally funded music conservatory that was funded by 2 sources, the Cultural Ministry and the Auswärtiges Amt, the Foreign Office. And the reason why is because the idea of the conservatory was based on the West Eastern Divan Orchestra. Let's try to create a school that brings together Arabs and Israelis, that brings them together and teaches them music, gives them bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, and let's build that school. And oh, by the way, let's put a new concert hall designed by Frank Gehry as part of the school. So when I came on board, I had to come up with this curriculum, build the faculty, help oversee the construction of the concert hall, which was using a lot of federal money, and create a kind of structure from the bottom up. It was basically a startup to create the school and make sure that it worked, create an audition structure, then create programming in the concert hall, and I devised a series of festivals, which hint, hint, in the concert hall. And I had to do that all by managing, the person, especially in the concert hall, the personalities of Frank Gehry and Daniel Barenboim. And these are 2 immovable objects. And they did not at all compromise on their
equally
aesthetic.
famous in their own worlds.
Exactly. And so they collided and they just stayed like that. And it was just like, so as a matter of fact, an interesting story about Daniel and Frank, they came up, Frank and Daniel had dinner in Milan. And that Daniel invited him to dinner and said, I want you to build a concert hall for my new academy. And so Frank, on a piece of like napkin, drew this incredible series of ovals that are interlaced on top of each other. I mean, it's a scribble, really. But it's beautiful. It's just like scribbled ovals that are elliptical. And Daniel's like, yes, that's it, the ovals. I want the ovals. And so Frank goes back to LA, back to his studio, shows them the ovals, and they're like, no can do, sir. And they come back with the design.
When did that ever stop him with Look at Bilbao?
Yeah, well, they came back with a standard box proscenium theater, like this one. And Daniel hit the roof. He's like, no, the ovals. I want the ovals. We had agreed on the ovals. And so then Frank went back to LA and they came up with this incredible design of a 360-degree concert hall, one oval at the floor level, which in Germany is the Parkett, and then one at the balcony level, the Rang, and they're just slightly askew, so it's almost two ovals like this. Huh. And then the musician sits in the middle of this kind of coliseum of people. But then it's completely modular, so you can take chairs out and turn it into like an Abendlieder, where you'd have chairs that go up in a stage in the front, or you could turn it into an amphitheater. I mean, it's an incredible hall, and it's the most beautiful, acoustically, the most beautiful hall for chamber music in the world. Sorry, Dock Street. But it really is a remarkable hall. And so they did, Daniel was able in this instance to actually push his will through and get the concert hall that he wanted. And now it's almost like a concert hall with a school attached, not the other way around.
What do you think you learned from him?
Wow, what did I learn from Daniel? I learned, this is going to sound so Machiavellian. Should I say it?
Yes, absolutely. Because it's not so Machiavellian.
I learned that information is power. That at a certain point, you have more information than other people. And if you cede that information, you cede power.
Huh. That's true.
It is.
What made you want to come and run the Spoleto Festival?
So when I was at Houston Grand Opera, Patrick and Perrin, who were, it was a bifurcated general director. Perrin was the managing director. Patrick was the artistic director. They asked me, what do you want to do? Do you want to run the Met? Do you want to run a major opera company? And I said, no, actually what I want to do is run a festival. Because all throughout my graduate training, I had been going to festivals in Europe. I'd been going to Festival dei Due Mondi in Spoleto. I'd gone to the Aix-en-Provence Festival. I'd go to Acant. I'd go to Royaumont, go to all these different festivals, the Manchester Festival, the Huddersfield Festival. And I was completely captivated. I had gotten the festival bug, captivated by this idea that you can basically squish a whole season into like 17 days, which is not good for one's health. So it's effectively like a boa constrictor swallowed an elephant. But I was captivated by this because I thought that this was like such an exciting way to express art, and that it also drew on my omnivorous tastes, my agnostic tastes. I'm someone who loves, 16th century Renaissance polyphony. I'm someone that loves hip hop. I'm someone that loves, the works of Eugene O'Neill and loves the dancing of Pina Bausch. So it's kind of hard to find a job that can bring all those different things together. So Spoleto came aboard, and I thought, maybe this could be the place for me. I had clearly known about it reputationally. I knew very well about Nigel's work in the field. And I was talking, this obviously all happened in the pandemic. I had been in Berlin at that point for about 6.5 years. My wife, Sarah, and I met in Berlin. She's Irish and had only lived in Berlin, Paris, and Dublin, and now Charleston. And she and I were thinking to ourselves, like, why are we here? Why are we in Germany? We have this beautiful child here. It doesn't really make sense for us to be here. And so I was speaking with some friends of mine from the industry in the US, because I was thinking about making a move back here. And there were a few jobs open at around the time that I was thinking about making this move. And I kind of just held things close to my chest, not sure which one I would go for. And then someone I deeply admire in this field called me and he said, well, Nigel retired. I think you should go for Spoleto. And I was like, yeah, that's a dream job. You can ask Sarah, you can call Sarah up, and she would say, that's a dream job.
Never in the history of this festival has the general director lived in Charleston. And you chose to live in Charleston full time. And I'm curious about that. See the reaction.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we have 2 small children. And we have a dog named Agatha Christie, who's as curmudgeonly as her name would suggest. Yeah. And Charleston's a really good place for small children and dogs. Like, dogs have more rights than I do in the city.
What does it mean for the festival that you're here
I know.
full-time?
I'm just... But I think, this festival is one of great potential. One of the reasons why I was so interested in this job is because it has great assets. It has its own scene shop. It has all of these venues in which to explore and create. And it's in this city, which is such an incredible place. This is a city of contradictions. I've written about this in my little curatorial essay, that it's like an outpost of the Northern Caribbean. It's a city of antebellum charm, and it's a city with a deep, dark history. And I thought to myself, if we're going to create a festival that is in Charleston, then why not make it a festival in Charleston? And for that to happen, I need to be in Charleston. I need to understand the stakeholders. I need to understand the place. I need to eat the food, which I love. I need to swim in the beaches, which I love. And be part of the city, be part of the city's fabric. And Sarah was game for it. She doesn't drive. She's learning now. Hence, being a European cosmopolitan elite doesn't give her a lot of driving. I'm being mean to her. And I think that, we decided like this could be a real incredible place for us to grow a family and find a beautiful home and make sure that we're part of this community.